Good morning. Happy Tuesday. I threw my back out walking on a perfectly flat surface, not carrying anything, didn't even step wrong, just old. Blink! Back went out. Lovely. So I didn't sleep very well last night, but I did have a chance to watch a bunch of videos. And one of the videos I watched was, I'm going to probably say this wrong, Hozokai. It was recommended by Van Balen. And in the video, I'm going to call him Mr. H. Mr. H is a lighthearted, fun video, about 15 minutes long. Feel free to watch it. His purpose was to define jurisdiction. His stated purpose, I should say, maybe not his actual purpose, but his stated purpose was to define jurisdiction for the benefit of the sovereign citizens out there. And at the end of the day, he came up with the definition that jurisdiction is location. And he's not an attorney. And, it's a much more complicated subject than that. And I hope to not spend too terrible long on this. I'm going to try to keep it to 10 minutes or less. But jurisdiction is a fairly complicated field. And part of the problem is that people use the word jurisdiction when they mean specific kinds of jurisdiction, like personal jurisdiction, subject matter jurisdiction, territorial jurisdiction. I mean, I'm sure there are other jurisdictions out there. But again, I'm not writing a treatise on the subject, although there are treatises out there if you do want to research them. But the big ones that you'll hear, let's start off with subject matter jurisdiction. Is the court that you're in, is the court competent to hear that particular matter? For example, if it's a criminal court, a federal court can't hear state criminal claims. A state court can't hear federal criminal matters because they are not competent courts to hear those particular claims. A court of appeals can't hear a matter for the first time. They have to hear an appeal. They're not competent to hear it the first time. The Supreme Court is the court of original jurisdiction for a case between states. Like if Texas sued, who'd they sue? Michigan or something? Minnesota? I don't remember who exactly they sued. They sued somebody, and the only court that could hear that case was the Supreme Court. No other court was competent to hear it. No other court had jurisdiction to hear that case. So that's one thing that you have to be aware of. In civil matters, in order to get jurisdiction over state law claims, a federal court has to have either diversity jurisdiction, which gives them subject matter jurisdiction, or there has to be a federal question involved, like the civil complaint has to involve the Constitution or a federal cause of action in it somewhere. So, I mean, it's complicated. It's a big subject, and I can see why sovereign citizens get lost in it. But subject matter jurisdiction is jurisdiction. So if someone's talking about jurisdiction, you need to determine if they're talking about subject matter jurisdiction or one of the others. The second one would be personal jurisdiction. Personal jurisdiction is the authority of the court over the person. In a civil cause of action, personal jurisdiction is normally done by serving them with the summons and the complaint. The plaintiff basically accepts the jurisdiction of the court. They say, you have power over me, but in order for the court to get power over the defendant has to be served. And there are rules on how you can serve the defendant and everything like that. At least in the state courts. Federal courts, it differs. Even in criminal matters, there are laws, there are rules, I guess, on how you can get personal jurisdiction. I know, at least for a while, I don't know if it's still going on, but back when I was in law school, in order to get personal jurisdiction over a corporation in a criminal matter, because yes, corporations can commit crimes, the prosecutor, the federal prosecutor, would have to serve them at one of their U.S. locations. Now, that might have changed. I think I heard something about it changing, but to the best of my knowledge at this point, they still have to actually serve the corporation at a U.S. location. Getting personal jurisdiction over a defendant is typically a lot easier over a natural human, a natural person, because you just arrest them, and all of a sudden, voila, you've got jurisdiction over them. So that's personal jurisdiction. The other one is territorial jurisdiction. Where can the state make and enforce laws? Or where can the federal government make and enforce laws? And typically, it'll be spelled out in the Constitution of the state, or the federal government. Obviously, is all of the territory of the United States. They can't make laws that operate in Mexico. That's Mexico's territorial jurisdiction. Where you could see territorial jurisdiction come into play are in federal enclaves. That's where you're most likely to see territorial jurisdiction come into play. There was a guy who got arrested for disorderly conduct in Georgia recently. I don't remember the guy's name. I would say it was a month ago or less. Apparently, he was inside disrupting them. They called the police. He was outside when the police showed up, and the police tried to get him to ID. He refused ID. He said that he was going to buy a stamp as soon as he was done with his business. The standard. I would just want to disrupt your business and pretend that I'm actually conducting business there. I'm there for the purpose of conducting business, not realizing that means that you're there to conduct the business that particular institution is engaged in conducting. But whatever, I digress. I'm trying to keep this under 10 minutes. I'm going to fail horribly. Anyway, they arrested him for disorderly conduct and charged him with disorderly conduct for his conduct inside of a post office. Now, post offices may be federal enclaves. And if they are federal enclaves, then you look at the agreement between the state and the federal government. And Georgia, for example, has a law that says basically that they lose control over those jurisdictions, except they can still serve people in those jurisdictions. So like if someone's getting sued in a Georgia state court, the police can go there and serve them, or someone can go there and serve them. If they commit a crime outside of that territorial or outside that federal enclave, then they could still be arrested within the federal enclave and brought to a court of competent jurisdiction in the state of Georgia. But if someone, for example, commits a crime in the federal enclave that is covered by federal law, and that the federal government, if the federal government has rules or laws in place for that federal enclave, then the federal government can enforce those particular rules. If they don't have rules or laws in place, then Georgia would be able to act. So, for example, inside of that, to make a long story even longer, inside of that post office, there are rules in place. There are federal laws in place that govern the actions that this guy was taking. So if this is a federal enclave, I think it's like 18 USC 7 or something around there. I don't remember exactly. And then the government codes, I think its government codes are like 5052 to 5053, somewhere around in there. I mean, it's been at least a month since I've looked at them, so I'm probably not even close. But if it is a federal enclave, then he would be able to say that those officers lacked jurisdiction to arrest him for that particular offense, because that offense took place in a federal enclave where Georgia did not have the power to make or enforce laws. Now, as far as officers are concerned, officers are typically allowed by statute. They're authorized by statute to enforce laws generally speaking, at least in the states that I've looked at, it's a statutory thing. For example, I've looked at Texas several times, and Texas peace officers are allowed to enforce the laws of Texas. Period. Throughout the state of Texas. So if you are a sheriff in Harris County and you see something happening in, I don't know, a different county. I'm not really good on counties in Texas. I'm sorry. You could absolutely enforce Texas state law throughout. It would depend on whether cities and city ordinances. It would depend on whether or not you could enforce those, on whether or not they give you the authorization to do it. Can a state level or local, county, whatever, police officer enforce federal law? Well, you'd have to look at the authorization in the statute. Like immigration, I believe, unless it's changed since I've looked at it, there was authorization in the immigration statutes for local, state, and local police to partner with and enforce the immigration laws. So, but then other things may not allow for state enforcement at all. So you'd have to look at what the statutes authorize them to do. Is that really jurisdiction? I guess. I don't know. I don't know if that would be defined as jurisdiction, honestly. I mean, it could be, but it wouldn't be one of the big three, really. And then finally, he gave an example. It was kind of humorous because he had to have what do you have to have? A person traveling, not driving, on a bicycle on a sidewalk in the city of Chicago. Could a uniformed Chicago police officer give him a citation? Sure. Could a Milwaukee from a different state, Milwaukee is Wisconsin? Yeah. Could a Milwaukee police officer who's there visiting give him a citation? No, because he says that because he lacks jurisdiction. I'm going to say because there is no statutory authorization for a non-certified police officer in the state of Illinois to issue citations. But however, if there was a person who was committing a felony, I'm assuming that Illinois has laws that allow people to make citizens arrests if they see a felony happening in front of them. Then could that Milwaukee police officer effectuate the arrest? Absolutely. It doesn't matter that he doesn't live there. What matters is there is a statute that authorizes him to make an arrest. So the example that was used, I don't think really dealt with jurisdiction, surprisingly enough. But it was a humorous little video. I will put a link to it in my description. I mean, obviously, don't give the guy a hard time. He probably means well, but it's a very deep subject. There's a lot of nuance to it, and the amount of time that was devoted to actually giving a definition to jurisdiction was subpar, I should say, and was misleading and could be taken as wrong. So anyway, I guess I blew my 10 minutes. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.